Welcome back to our news bulletin. In the US, over 1,200 more people have died from COVID-19, raising the total to nearly 96,000. Worldwide, the death count has crossed 338,000, while infections are over 5.2 million. More in this report.
As the number of cases and deaths from the novel coronavirus start to plateau, more countries ease the restrictions. In the US, New York State has dropped the absolute ban on gatherings of any size. Governor Andrew Cuomo has issued an executive order saying up to 10 people are now allowed to be together as long as they abide by social distancing guidelines. US President Donald Trump has also urged state governors to allow the reopening of places of worship.
Today, I'm identifying houses of worship, churches, synagogue, and mosques as essential places that provide essential services. So I'm correcting this injustice and calling houses of worship essential. I call upon governors to allow our churches and places of worship to open right now.
The World Health Organization says South America has now become the epicenter of the pandemic as Brazil's death toll rose by 1,001 to over 21,000. Brazil's confirmed infections exceed 330,000, overtaking Russia to become the world's second hotspot for COVID-19. In Chile, poor residents staged protests demanding food aid to cope with the lockdown in place since late March. Peru has also extended its state of emergency and in nationwide lockdown to fight the pandemic until the end of June. Meanwhile, Britain has introduced a 14-day quarantine for all international travelers from June 8th or face a $1,218 fine for violation.
International arrivals to self-isolate for 14 days. That is the incubation period of the virus, so that if people have become infected overseas, we can limit the spread of the virus at home.
Elsewhere, China has recorded no new COVID-19 cases on the mainland for the first time since the pandemic began in the city of Wuhan last year.
Pakistan's COVID-19 death toll has crossed 1,100 after 34 died in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry reported 1,743 infection cases overnight, bringing the tally to over 52,000. The Health Ministry said 16,635 patients of coronavirus have recovered so far, while 412 remain critical. The ministry said over 460,000 tests have been conducted countrywide, with 14,705 taken since yesterday. Meanwhile, health advisor Dr. Zafar Mirza has warned the situation can worsen if people do not follow standard operating procedures. The death toll from the plane crash incident in Pakistan has reached 97, while 2 passengers have survived. Yesterday, Pakistan International Airlines plane with an estimated 99 people on board crashed in the coastal city of Karachi. The Provincial Health Ministry says 19 victims have been identified so far. The ministry said a sample collection unit for DNA tests of victims and their families has been set up in Karachi. Meanwhile, Chief Executive Officer of PIA, Arshad Malik, said Safety Investigation Board will hold a thorough inquiry into the tragic incident. Talking to media, he said the cause of the incident will be ascertained after taking all factors into account for the investigation. He said the crashed Airbus jet was technically fit for flying and there was no obvious reason for the accident. Pakistan has once again condemned Indian attempts to change the demography of occupied Kashmir using its new domicile law. During a telephonic conversation with the OIC Secretary General, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said India's move is in violation of UN Security Council resolutions and the 4th Geneva Convention. Qureshi briefed Secretary General Yusuf bin Ahmad Al Uthaymeen on the situation in the occupied valley. He said Pakistan is concerned over growing human rights violations and an increase in extrajudicial killings of Kashmiris. Foreign Minister said India might stage a false flag operation to divert world's attention. Qureshi said UN, OIC and international observers must be allowed to assess the situation in occupied Kashmir. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says India may resort to a false flag operation to divert global attention from genocide in Kashmir. Speaking to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres over the phone, Qureshi said India is brutalizing Kashmiris through fake encounters and extrajudicial killings. He said belligerent statements by the Indian political and military leadership are posing threats to peace and security in the region. The Foreign Minister called on the UN as well as the Security Council to play their due role in preventing the situation from escalating any further. He said India must be stopped from its illegal actions, preserving peace and security in South Asia. Guterres said he is closely monitoring the situation and will play his part in taking up these matters. He also expressed his deep condolences on the crash of PIA flight and the tragic loss of life. The UN-backed Libyan army says Khalifa Haftar's militia is using withdrawal tactics of ISIS in the south of the capital, Tripoli. In a statement, the military said rebel forces are trapping mines in residential areas as they leave. The military said some mines are trapped to explode as the vehicle passes, while others when someone goes near it. The development comes as internationally recognized Government of National Accord said it has recaptured parts of southern Tripoli from Haftar's forces. It said the Libyan army has advanced into several districts and overran a military camp. The Libyan National Army of Haftar said it had already pulled out of those areas as a humanitarian gesture for Ramadan. Now, 8 inmates have been killed and another 8 hospitalized with injuries after clashes broke out at a prison in Mexico's central state of Jalisco. In a press conference, security officials said 3 prisoners were killed by firearms while 5 others died from beatings in Puente Grande complex. The jail authorities said the fight broke out as inmates participated in a sports activity. Officials said jail staff never lost control of the facility and they recovered 2 firearms and a homemade explosive device. They said 5 people have been detained for having a possible role in the confrontation. The jail authorities said they will probe whether any public officials were involved. Russia says it intends to implement the provisions of Open Skies Treaty despite the unilateral withdrawal of the US from the accord. Speaking to media, the Russian mission to NATO said it is ready for further dialogue with the US in the interests of European and international security. The mission said all parties to the treaty will have to clearly define their positions. Earlier, Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said the US provided no facts to back up its allegations that Russia has repeatedly violated the treaty. He said Washington's claims are totally unfounded. Meanwhile, 10 European nations expressed regret over US decision to exit the treaty, which allows unarmed surveillance flights over member countries. The US has called on the World Health Organization to start immediate work on investigating its handling of the response to the COVID-19. In a statement, Assistant Secretary for Health Admiral Brett Greer said there is no time to waste and urged the agency to also probe into the source of the virus. He said the US lauds the call for an impartial, independent and comprehensive review to be undertaken in consultation with member states. Giroir referred to an EU resolution that was unanimously adopted by the WHO's annual Ministerial Assembly calling for a thorough evaluation. He said the WHO Assembly must address the outcome of the review process, including Taiwan's ability to participate as an observer. Afghanistan says the number of COVID-19 cases in the country has crossed 9,000. In a statement, the Health Ministry said 12 people lost their lives over the past 24 hours, taking the tally to 205. It said 542 new cases were registered overnight in Kabul, Herat, Nangarhar, Baghlan and Balkh. So far, around 1,000 people have recovered from the virus in the country. Kabul has become a hotspot for the virus with 316 reported cases in 24 hours. The U.S. has imposed sanctions on the Nicaraguan Army Chief and Finance Minister for alleged violations of human rights and corruption. In a statement, U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said Nicaragua's widespread violence against its own people is unacceptable. He said sanctions were imposed on Army Commander-in-Chief Julio Cesar Avalos and Finance Minister Ivan Adolfo Acosta. Mnuchin said the curbs will freeze any assets held by these officials in the U.S. and will also bar Americans from dealing with them. The secretary said the U.S. will continue applying pressure on President Daniel Ortega regime until it stops repressing the Nicaraguan people. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also said Managua must restore democracy in the country. In India, millions of migrant workers continue to face hunger, hardships, and road accidents in their journey back home. Prime Minister Narendra Modi imposed a sudden lockdown in March, causing mayhem for laborers. In recent incidents, hundreds of workers crossed Yamuna River on foot from Haryana to go home in Bihar. Talking to media, the migrants said they have been crossing the river at night to avoid the daytime heat. The workers said they do not have money and police thrashed them on the road, which is why they are crossing the river at night. Meanwhile, 35 migrants were injured after the bus they were traveling in overturned in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh. We're taking a short break now, but stay tuned for more news. Welcome back. British authorities have charged four men and a woman with the murder of Aya Hachim, a Muslim woman shot dead in Blackburn last week. 19-year-old Lebanese-British Muslim was shot dead in a drive-by shooting as she was out for grocery shopping. In a statement, police said two of the suspects, Feroz Suleiman and Abu Bakr Satya, will appear in court today. It said the pair will also be charged with attempting to murder a man who was not the intended target in the incident. The force later said Usman Satya, Judy Chapman and Kashif Manzoor have also all been charged with murder and attempted murder. Lancashire police said two shots were fired in the incident. At first hit a building and the second killed Aya. Myanmar says it will submit a report due Saturday outlining its claims of compliance with the World Court's order to protect the Rohingya community. In January, the International Court of Justice asked Myanmar to implement provisional measures for the protection of Rohingya. A foreign ministry official said the government is working on the report but will not discuss its contents before submitting it. Last year, the court agreed to consider a case alleging that Myanmar committed genocide against the Rohingya. In 2017, Myanmar military's crackdown in Rakhine State forced about 740,000 Rohingya to flee to neighboring Bangladesh. This also led to accusations that security forces committed mass rapes and killings and burned thousands of homes belonging to the Rohingya. Malta has rescued a group of 140 migrants from a sinking dinghy, but refused to bring them to land. Authorities are holding the migrants on a chartered tourist boat just outside the country's territorial waters. The rescue was conducted by a Maltese patrol boat after the dinghy drifted into search and rescue region. The rescued group joined the tourist boats, which already hold 160 migrants rescued 2 weeks ago. The government says it will not allow any migrants in Malta, as other EU nations have not kept promises to take refugees already brought to the island. But it said a group of 19 people, including children and pregnant women, was brought to Malta for humanitarian reasons. The WHO says 80 million children worldwide are at risk of measles due to the disruption of routine immunization during the COVID-19 pandemic. In a statement, it said the immunization services are hindered in 68 countries. It said disruption threatens to unwind decades of progress against vaccine-preventable diseases like measles. Meanwhile, UNICEF said they cannot let the fight against one disease come at the expense of progress in their fight against other diseases. It said these immunizations must restart as soon as possible, or there is a risk exchanging one deadly outbreak for another. A 37-year-old Thai street artist is splashing walls across Bangkok with murals depicting the fight against coronavirus. More in this report.
As the world recuperates from the novel coronavirus pandemic, an artist in Thailand has come up with a unique way of keeping the virus at bay. He paints murals on the walls of Bangkok. Going by the pseudonym Newborn, which means restless hands in Thai, the 37-year-old signature designs feature what he refers to as winged creatures. They resemble birds dressed as health workers fighting against an ominous-looking green coronavirus.
I want to play my part in reminding people about the situation and recording the history in which we all helped each other by staying home to stop the spread of the virus.
Newborn said he preferred the canvas of the streets rather than a formal art gallery to exhibit his work so that it remains more accessible to the public.
On the basis of our society, there is a huge gap between art and the ordinary people. Thais are not into art. They don't really understand it. Therefore, I put artwork on the streets at places where people sitting in cars will be able to see it driving by, where they don't have to go to an art exhibition or a gallery to see the art.
Newborn prefers painting during the hours of night. Most of his spray paint murals take around 2 hours to finish. Although the artist says he is not popular in Thailand, his artwork has been displayed abroad in countries like Japan, the US, Germany, and most recently Palestine.
We can't show you the weather right now due to some technical difficulties. But this was all for our top stories. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.